Okay, my topic is drug testing for public assistance. My claim on this is actually the opposite of what most people think. I actually don't think that drug testing should be mandatory for public assistance because it has a negative effect on society. The definition of public assistance is mostly just any kind of government assistance provided to the needy. It's also better known as welfare. People usually think welfare is like a specific program or something, but it's actually just the same thing as public assistance. In the recent years, it's actually become a lot more popular for people to want mandatory drug testing for public assistance, and 12 states have actually already passed legislation regarding this testing. So we're going to go back to my claim, which is the fact that I believe that drug testing for public assistance has a negative effect on society. My first secondary claim for this is that drug testing for public assistance promotes stereotypes. My second is that drug testing for public assistance negatively affects the well-being of children. And then lastly, it costs more than it saves. So for stereotypes, for some reason we somehow came up with a stereotype of a person who doesn't work or doesn't do anything, just collects welfare money and uses it for drugs or whatever it may be. But that's all just really a stereotype. Most people who need public assistance are also people who are workers or taxpayers. According to a study from 1996, it's a long time ago, I know, but it's from the National Institute of Alcohol and Alcoholism. And the differences between the proportion of welfare and non-welfare recipients using illegal drugs are statistically insignificant. And in some of the states that have passed the legislation, some of them actually were halted because they found out that that it wasn't really working for them. For example, in Florida, there was actually they had this program running or drug testing for public assistance for only 4 months. They only found 2.6% of people who did fail the drug test, so that's really not a huge percentage of people. So it didn't really save any money for them or do anything for them. And it's really just like giving into the stereotypes that most people already think that there is. Also, like I said, a lot of people who do receive public assistance are employed. So according to Berkeley Center of Labor Research and Education for the University of California, nearly 3/4 of people helped by programs geared to the poor are members of a family headed by a worker. So again, like I said, that was all just a stereotype. Most people who do receive public assistance are taxpayers themselves, so they understand where that money's going. Which brings me to my second point. Drug testing for public assistance actually negatively affects the children as well. So if there are some parents that do fail a drug test, the kids are going to be harmed in this also, because they're not going to have access to the healthy foods that they would be eating if they were getting assistance. And sorry, give me 1 second. And it also teaches children that mostly just drugs are bad, which is not really the case, because drug testing doesn't test for blood or for blood alcohol content. So if somebody was drunk or abuses alcohol, then it's not going to catch that in the drug tests, which is another reason why they were actually passing these drug tests, was that so it was supposed to be for the benefit of children and to help them, or help actually the parents of those children to put them into a better situation, but it's actually not testing for alcohol. And according to the American Civil Liberties Union, most types of drug tests fail to detect alcohol abuse, most commonly substance abused by Americans. So that leads us to our last point, which it costs more money than it does save for us. So, sorry. In the Florida chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, it showed that drug testing actually cost the state $30 per drug test and ended up costing an aggregate of $45,000 more than the state saved in welfare payments alone. So as you can see, it's not really beneficial to us to have drug testing because it's actually costing us more money than it is saving us. And also that money and time, or the time and money that we spend on those drug tests could be spent elsewhere on something more important. So again, I just wanted you guys to know that even though it may seem like the obvious way to go is to say that drug testing for public assistance is something that should be done or that it has a positive effect on society, it actually does have a negative effect because of all of my secondary claims, which were it promotes stereotypes, it affects the well-being of some children, and it costs more than it saves. Thank you.
Gesundheit. Well, at the start of the speech, it sounds like you're making a policy argument that this shouldn't be done, but there is a claim of fact that's built into it, and you do finally get to it, so I thought that that was effective. There's a preview of what the secondary points are going to be. That's okay. The background on the controversy, you mentioned that 12 states are doing this, and I think you need to develop that a little bit more, because later on you say a number of the states have abandoned it. So the first question that pops into my mind are, what are the states that are doing this? The only one that I ever heard mentioned was Florida. And how many people have they been testing? How many people have they found problems with? There's got to be some data on this if this in fact is the kind of issue that you're talking about. Now, the assumption that there's a problem here, I think there could probably be some data that shows that people do the stereotyping that you're talking about, but I think the stereotyping has little to do with the drug testing, and instead the drug testing is a reaction to the stereotyping instead of causing the stereotyping. So that's a little bit awkward. I think you need to have a stronger link there. You do kind of dismiss the idea that everybody who's on welfare is not working or doesn't have a legitimate reason for welfare. I thought you had some good answers on that. What I didn't hear is any information that really suggested that there isn't a lot of drug use by welfare recipients. The only data that I had was that there wasn't any substantial difference between the number of consumers of alcohol than we had in some other situation, and that was pretty old data on that particular point. Let's see, and I don't even, like I said, I don't even think it applied to the issue that you're talking about. It's some other data that's going on. The Florida information, it sounds to me like, you're using this. I can't tell if the Florida thing was a policy or if it was a study or if it was a pilot program or what's going on. You suggest that it got canceled. If it was a policy that got canceled, then we should have some factual data on that describes what's going on there, and then we can kind of put it in its appropriate place, and you can say, in this one place where they tried it, it didn't work very well. The cost issue on the third point, $30 per test, in the long run, it sounds, from the way you presented the evidence, I'm not sure that this is what it said, but it said in the long run, it cost them $40,000 more to do the testing than whatever they saved on it. In a state with as many people in it as Florida has, $40,000, in essence, you're saying we could use that money on something else. Yeah, I'm not sure what for. Breakfast for, transit workers or something. $40,000. I'd like to have $40,000, but the state of Florida, $40,000, they spent that in less than a quarter of a second, I'm sure. That's just, the idea that that's going to solve any problem, I think, is a little bit, iffy. The second point on the kids, I didn't hear any information that said any kid was denied access to food because their parents were found to be using drugs. It might have been interesting if there was some information that showed that families were broken up because of this. Then we could argue about whether or not that's the best strategy or whether or not it's an effective way of dealing with drug use by parents. But the only real argument I got on this is, well, it never detects alcohol, and that's the most widely used drug. Okay, well, that might be true. I think the response from the people defending this would be to say, it's not perfect. It doesn't fix everything. We are concerned, however, about people who are using illegal drugs and are getting subsidized for doing so by the welfare payments that are being made to them. If that is a problem, we don't really want to be doing that sort of thing. Of course, I think it's incumbent on people in that situation to be arguing and demonstrating that a problem really does exist in the first place. And I guess we'll have to wait for the response speaker to hear anything on that. All right, thank you.